Walk down Sunset Boulevard in 2025, and you might notice something haunting. The iconic soundstages, once bustling with the energy of 1,000 productions, are quiet. The for lease signs are multiplying. For nearly a century, Hollywood was the undisputed king of global culture, a neon empire where dreams were manufactured and exported to every corner of the earth. But today, the dream factory is running on fumes. We are witnessing the end of an era. The workforce has shrunk by 1/3. Box office revenues are billions of dollars below their peak. And the audience? They've moved on. How did the most powerful entertainment machine in history suddenly lose its magic? This is the story of the rise and fall of Hollywood. To understand how Hollywood fell, we must first understand how it rose. It didn't start with glamour. It started with a getaway. In the early 1900s, the movie business was based in New Jersey, under the iron fist of Thomas Edison. Edison held the patents for motion picture cameras and was notorious for suing anyone who tried to make a film without paying him. To escape his lawyers, a group of renegade filmmakers fled as far west as they could go, to a sleepy Orange Grove suburb of Los Angeles called Hollywood. It was the perfect hideout. The weather allowed for year-round filming, the diverse landscapes provided every backdrop imaginable, and if Edison's agents came looking, the Mexican border was just a few hours away. This spirit of rebellion built the foundation of the empire. By the 1930s, that rebellious spirit had solidified into a well-oiled machine known as the studio system. 5 major studios, MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers, RKO, and 20th Century Fox, controlled everything. They didn't just make the movies, they owned the cameras, the writers, the directors, and most importantly, the stars. Actors like Judy Garland and Clark Gable were signed to strict, long-term contracts, essentially becoming property of the studio. It was a factory assembly line for art. Every week, millions of Americans flocked to theaters, which were also owned by the studios. This vertical integration meant they controlled the product from creation to consumption, guaranteeing massive profits. It was a monopoly of dreams, and for a while, it seemed unbreakable. The first major blow to the empire came from the US government. In 1948, the Supreme Court handed down the Paramount Decree, a ruling that declared the studio system an illegal monopoly. The studios were forced to sell off their theater chains. Overnight, they lost their guaranteed distribution. They could no longer force theaters to show their bad movies just to get the good ones. This shattered the financial safety net of the Golden Age. Suddenly, every movie had to succeed on its own merit. It was the beginning of the end for the old way of doing business. And it happened just as a new technological threat was arriving in living rooms across America. Throughout the 1950s, ticket sales plummeted. Why pay for a movie when you could watch I Love Lucy at home for free? Television terrified the movie moguls. In a desperate attempt to compete, Hollywood went big. They introduced widescreen formats, 3D, and epic spectacles like Ben-Hur, experiences that a small black and white TV set couldn't match. It worked, partially, but the audience had fundamentally changed. The habit of going to the movies once or twice a week was broken. Hollywood was no longer the only game in town. It was just one option among many. To survive, the industry had to pivot from being a factory to being a casino. In 1975, a mechanical shark changed the economics of Hollywood forever. Before Jaws, movies opened slowly in a few cities. Jaws opened everywhere at once, backed by a massive TV advertising campaign. It was the birth of the blockbuster. 2 years later, Star Wars confirmed the new model. Spend huge amounts of money to make a massive spectacle, market it aggressively, and make even more money on toys and merchandise. The studios stopped trying to make hundreds of decent movies and started betting the farm on a few massive hits every year. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy that defined the industry for the next 40 years. For a long time, the blockbuster model was sustained by a secret weapon, the DVD. In the 1990s and 2000s, physical media sales were a license to print money. A movie could fail in theaters, but still make a fortune when people bought the disc at Walmart. This home video revenue accounted for nearly 50% of a studio's profit. It allowed them to take risks on mid-budget dramas and quirky comedies. Hollywood was swimming in cash, unaware that they were about to trade this golden goose for a digital penny. Enter Netflix. At first, studios saw streaming as just another way to sell their old library content, but they underestimated the shift. As audiences flocked to subscriptions, DVD sales collapsed. The studios panicked and decided to launch their own streaming services: Disney+, Max, Paramount+. They spent billions producing endless content to chase subscribers. But there was a fatal flaw. The math didn't work. Trading a $20 DVD purchase for a slice of a $10 monthly subscription was economic suicide. By 2024, the peak TV bubble had burst. Wall Street stopped rewarding subscriber growth and started demanding profits, which were nowhere to be found. Looking back, 2019 was the deceptive peak before the fall. On the surface, things looked incredible. Avengers Endgame broke records, and the global box office hit an all-time high of over $42 billion. Most of that money came from just a handful of massive superhero movies. The mid-budget film was dead. The comedy was dead. And reliance on the Chinese market, which contributed huge sums, was about to evaporate as China turned toward domestic productions. Hollywood was a top-heavy giant, standing on a single, fragile leg: the superhero franchise. And then, the world shut down. The pandemic didn't kill Hollywood, but it accelerated its illness by a decade. When theaters closed in 2020, the habit of moviegoing was severed. For 2 years, audiences were trained to expect blockbuster entertainment in their living rooms. Often on the same day it hit theaters, by the time cinemas reopened, the theatrical window, the exclusive period a movie plays in theaters, but more importantly, the psychological link was broken. The casual moviegoer, the person who just went to see whatever is playing, disappeared. If it wasn't a massive cultural event, people simply stayed home. Then came the strikes of 2023. Writers and actors walked out for months, demanding fair pay in the streaming era and protection against AI. It was a necessary fight for survival, but the short-term cost was catastrophic. The industry lost an estimated $6 billion. Production ground to a halt. When the dust settled, the studios used the stoppage as an excuse to, quote, reset. They canceled shows, fired thousands of staff, and slashed budgets. In 2024 and 2025, production levels in Los Angeles didn't bounce back. They plummeted. The work didn't just pause, it started to leave. This brings us to the ghost town of 2025. Today, Los Angeles soundstages have a vacancy rate of over 35%, a number that was unthinkable a decade ago. Why? Because it's too expensive. Productions have fled to places like Atlanta, London, and Toronto, chasing massive tax incentives. It's called runaway production, and it has hollowed out the industry's home. The skilled workforce, the carpenters, electricians, and costume designers, are leaving California or leaving the industry entirely. The infrastructure of Hollywood is still there, but the work is happening thousands of miles away. The financial reality of 2025 is stark. The global box office is hovering around $33 billion, still nearly $10 billion short of pre-pandemic levels. Adjusted for inflation, the drop is even more terrifying. The domestic box office has struggled to crack $9 billion. We see occasional hits like Wicked or the latest Avatar, but the consistent stream of revenue is gone. The middle class of movies has vanished. Studios are now risk-averse corporations that only greenlight existing intellectual property. If it's not a sequel, a prequel, or a toy adaptation, it doesn't get made. This creative stagnation is driving the final nail in the coffin: audience apathy. The biggest threat to Hollywood isn't a strike or a virus. It's a teenager with a smartphone. Gen Z and Generation Alpha don't revere movie stars. In fact, a 2024 survey showed that teens trust YouTubers and TikTok creators significantly more than traditional celebrities. The creator economy is now a $250 billion industry. Young people are spending their time on Roblox, Fortnite, and YouTube, not in movie theaters. They prefer authentic, fast-paced content over polished 2-hour films. Hollywood is trying to sell a premium product to a generation that prefers the homemade alternative. Perhaps the most dystopian part of the fall is who owns the rubble. Traditional studios like Paramount have faced immense struggles, merging and downsizing just to stay afloat. Meanwhile, the new power players are Apple and Amazon. For these tech giants, making movies isn't their business. It's a marketing expense to sell phones or free shipping. They don't need their movies to make a profit. This fundamentally breaks the market for everyone else who does. When art becomes just a perk in a Prime subscription, the value of that art hits zero. So, is cinema dead? Not exactly. But Hollywood, as the center of the universe, is gone. The future looks like a split reality. On one side, we will have content sludge, AI-generated backgrounds, endless sequels, and algorithm-driven mediocrity designed for background noise. On the other side, we will see the rise of boutique cinema. Smaller, cheaper, auteur-driven films that bypass the major studios entirely. The monopoly on distribution is over. The next Spielberg won't be asking a studio head for permission. They'll just upload. The Hollywood sign still stands on the hill, but the town below has changed forever. The glitz is peeling. The soundstages are empty. The money has moved to Silicon Valley, and the production has moved to London. At the same time, made by the same people, the empire has crumbled, leaving behind a fragmented landscape of creators, streamers, and tech giants fighting for our attention. It's a scary time for the industry, but for the art form, it might just be the liberation it needed. The rise of Hollywood was a century-long miracle of art and commerce. Its fall was a slow collision of technology, arrogance, and changing times. The physical place may be fading, and the business model is certainly broken, but the human desire for stories remains. The Dream Factory isn't in Los Angeles anymore. It's in the cloud, it's in our pockets, and it's everywhere. The king is dead. Long live the content.